So I got pulled over on a speeding ticket. This information is in that video that I was telling you about on Rico Busters.
Okay, number 13.
Number 13, okay. And so here's the notice to appear. I'm supposed to be seeing a magistrate. They sent this to the mail. This magistrate had the P number on it. They also say I'm supposed to see a member of the representative of the police department. Well, I went to this hearing. They said that I should be expected to pay fines and costs, and here's all my due process stuff here. And so and the name of the officer was Greg, by the person by the name of Greg. Well, I go to this hearing. What I found was a dark area where the magistrate was supposed to be, no judge in there, and instead, and the whole the gallery was filled up with people, and out of the prosecutor's office was the police officer that wrote the ticket, dressed in a suit, in where it says prosecutor above the door, and he was coming out and calling people in one by one and extorting money from them, and saying if they don't pay him what he was demanding right then and there, they would have to come back later, and then they would see a magistrate or the judge. They'd go in front of the judge, assuming that it was going to be Khalil, the one that put me in jail for 30 days a long time later, and they weren't going to get any breaks at that point. So they needed to either pay him, and he was basically impersonating a lawyer, being a prosecutor. He was operating out of the prosecutor's office, and he was not using his uniform. He was not presenting himself in the public as a police officer, but a lawyer instead. And so he did the same thing for me. This is the lawyers that represent the township. They are as crooked as you might imagine. And so anyway, I went, when this guy wanted me to sign something, then I was questioning, had too many questions for him, and he decided that he was just going to reschedule my next hearing, and because he asked me, what am I doing there? I said, I'm here to file a cross complaint against the police officer that wrote me the ticket, and that police officer, and he said, well, that's me. And I said, well, it sure is. And he said, well, you aren't going to be filing anything in here. This is a one-way street. We're going against you, and you can't do anything. So I decided to go home, and I looked up that bar number, that P.
Right.
And what I found was there was no such number. And so I realized that I was a victim of fraud because this was sent to the mail. It's mail fraud because they told me that I was supposed to be seeing a magistrate. They had a fraudulent magistrate's number on there. And so I filed my cross complaint against this officer at a higher court, at the Wayne County Circuit Court in Detroit. And And so when I filed that case, I had filed it as a racketeering and corruption case, and I named the police officer, I named the supervisor that told me I was going to get due process if I showed up at court, I named the court itself, I named the judge, I named the township supervisor because I did contact the township supervisor and let her know what's going on in the township. I talked to a lawyer about this, and he said they can't do that. It's deprivation of a person's right to due process.
And what lawyer was that? What lawyer? That
was Darrell Salisbury. He was a Michigan bar lawyer, and he was somebody that.
Is he still a lawyer?
He's retired after handling another case for me, and got taken through the ringer by a judge behind closed.
Does that tell you something?
It does. Well, and
does that tell you something?
And instead of calling, and this is the man who, though he befriended me and he was the only person of the bar that would side with me for a long time, I never could actually get him to admit that this was all corruption, even though it was in his face. But so I've got, let me just give you another idea. This is the copy of what I had filed, the emergency injunction for relief. I had a failure I had a notice of removal, which I think is in a previous filing here. I'm sorry.
Well, let me cut to the the chase why I came here.
Yeah.
Because we could probably be here for hours. We'll never get it. We'll never get it all done. So, tell me this, David.
Yes.
You're watching this other guy's hearing. It's a non-recorded hearing, theoretically, right?
It was not. They had a court reporter in there. We didn't pay that much attention to it, but this was supposed to be an informal
it was not
hearing.
informal hearing, but it's not your hearing.
That's not my.
You're just there with several other people as court watchers to see the corruption at work.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Right. We
Okay.
were. Some people might call us auditors of the court. You know, we're just.
Ed Brown
people.
would call them constitutional rangers. That's what
Okay.
Ed Brown, and he's still in federal prison. So then you go out to take a leak in the court bathroom. You come back. You sit down, and the bailiffs do what?
About 15 minutes later, the person whose case we were going to be seeing stood up. He was turning around to go use the restroom. He later told me. But when he stood up and started turning away from the court, he was in the gallery as everybody else was. But the judge asked him to stop and turn around and come back through into the bar area and sit in the jury box. And he started questioning that right away because we, as everybody in the courtroom there, had seen a guy who owed the court money, and she had sent him to the jury box when he had could not pay his fine or whatever it was. She sent him to the jury box, and we later saw him taken out in handcuffs and placed under arrest. So when this guy who was going to go use the restroom stood up to walk away from the court, and she instructed him to go into the jury box, he started questioning why right away. And as soon as he did, the bailiffs started yelling at him. And apparently, something that I didn't realize is while I had gone out to the restroom, that during that time also the judge had spoken to the bailiff and said something in private, you know. So this is only what I was told.
So what happened to you?
So this guy is protesting on his way over to the jury box, questioning the judge as to why she was doing what she's doing, and the bailiffs are screaming at him to get in the jury box, shut up, and sit down. And so when he got into the jury box, there was this. He was sitting down, and then he was standing up to say something else. Well, why am I in here? And then they'd tell him to sit down, and then
Okay,
he'd
and
stand
what
up.
happened to you?
What happened to me was that I was taking notes on what I was seeing, and the next thing I got a nudge like this from the court watcher that was sitting next to me, a woman, and she said, and I looked up, and I'm seeing this physically, and I'm hearing stand up like that.
He's pointing at you and got his other hand on the gun.
Right, or near the gun.
Near the gun.
He's like this, and he's saying, and he's yelling at me, saying, "Stand up," like that. So I stood up, and as I stood up, and you know, my whole awareness is just like, what the hell's going on here? And then I heard a shrieking, "Sit down!" And apparently it was the judge telling the guy in the jury box to sit down, but I took the hint and I sat down. And so then I pick up my notepad and I'm going back to what I was doing before. And so then I heard this loud commotion and more screaming for stand up. And when I looked up again, he has his hand on his gun and he's like this again. And he's about 2 rows in front,
Right.
leaning over the rail. So I stood up, while I was there, I think I said, as I look at transcripts, because I do have some transcripts, and shouldn't have said that, but they were furnished about a year and a half later. These transcripts say that I had said I did stand up, but I stood up anyway, and when I did, apparently some other witness testimony that I have shows that the judge had asked me my name. I didn't hear it. I wasn't directing. I had no judge had no jurisdiction over me.
You were still in the gallery.
I was still in the gallery, and I wasn't paying attention to what was going on behind the bar. What I was looking at was this guy with his hand on his gun, and I wasn't paying attention to anything else. And about that time, there was other people, other police officers that were coming into the courtroom, and I'm just frozen, and I'm not moving. And so next thing I knew, there was an instruction for me to place my hand behind my back. The bailiffs or the police officers took me through the rest of the aisle and into a concrete room that was dark, that was adjacent to the courtroom. I mean, if you open the door, you could see the judge's place right there. It was right there at the courtroom. And so for an undetermined amount of time, I was sitting in there while they had the door mostly closed. And from the affidavits that I've got, what she did from that point forward is, as soon as they had put my hands behind my back, she said, she screamed out that she had a courtroom full of Moors, and that she needed some extra help. And then she said, according to the transcripts that I have, she said, and the next one is right there, you know. And then she started inquiring, and this guy, he got up, and as soon as he saw me being handcuffed, he was another court watcher, he got up and he just started heading for the door. And so what they said is, you, sir, you come back here, and they actually physically moved him back to his, they, you know, accosted him, put him back towards where he was sitting, and then he had to address the judge, as the judge drilled him on who I was. And so based on that information, I can't say that she knew who I was at all. But
okay, was there any Moors in the courtroom at all? Did you notice or see even one Moor in her courtroom?
well, I can't identify what is a Moor, what is a Christian, what is anybody else, but so I don't.
Well, how could she identify them then? If you can't, and you're sitting closer to them than she was, because she's up behind the bench, how could she identify Moors? Or was that just gobbledygook to put on the record to justify her abuse?
Well, and the way I read the transcript, it did look like that she was trying to justify after this whole thing was getting to a conclusion. But she did. And to answer your question, you can't. And in fact, she wrongly identified me as a Moor. For all
okay, so now you're identified as a Moor. They take you out in handcuffs.
Correct.
They take you in a police vehicle to a county jail 6 counties away. Which county was that?
That was Midland County. So that is 6 counties away from Wayne County where this happened.
Do you have any idea why they took you 6 counties away?
I have no idea whatsoever. And in fact, the police, the report, I'll show you the...
How would they have jurisdiction to take you to another county?
None of this was done with jurisdiction. There was no
jurisdiction. So you had a total kangaroo court in full swing, and people complying with the kangaroo nutcase judge. What was her name?
Her name was Karen Khalil.
Karen Khalil.
Khalil.
So you got this nutcase, Karen Khalil, running a kangaroo court, and nobody thought to arrest her on the spot?
Nobody arrested her, and that's the basis of my federal case right now, because it's called a state-created danger. Once that judge issued that order to those police officers had a choice. Knowing that I didn't do anything except sit there, that the bailiffs, the judges, the judge herself, the police officers that came into the room, none of them had any evidence whatsoever that I had done anything to disrupt this court or to be charged with what ended up being a criminal contempt of court charge.
So you end up spending 30 days. How did you get out? They just suddenly released you after 30 days?
It was without bond. This whole thing, it was, I ended up, they would not, because it was supposed to be a informal hearing, this court, now this is confidential, please.
Oh, well, then we'll get it on tape.
You already got it, but I can do a still frame on it. But this is something I haven't introduced to the federal case yet, and I don't plan to
Till September.
until either they dismiss my case, which I'll go public with this thing,
Okay.
or or when discovery starts.
So then after you get out, after the 30 days, you discover they manufacture a case that allegedly took place, but in reality, you were never given notice to this case. There was no case number till after you put 30 days in Midland County Jail, and now you're out, and now they start manufacturing to cover up what they did to make it appear as if you had had a trial.
Well,
did I say that right?
That actually, that's incorrect, because this judgment of sentence right here, partially right in that there was no case. I had no case before the court, but this judgment order that was signed on that day that they took me to jail, signed by that judge, says that there is a case, and they assigned a case number that didn't exist before. They say this was a case of the people of the township of Redford versus David Scheid, and that the defendant was found guilty on June 8, 2012 of the crime as stated below, convicted by, it says that I had, it was one count, pled guilty for contempt of court. It says here that defendant was advised of right to counsel and appointed counsel.
And was there ever a time you were in Karen, the witch judge, was there ever a time you were in a court and you pled guilty to anything?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. With regard to this case here, it says that it was that I was appointed counsel and knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waived that right. None of this is true. This is completely fraudulent.
Complete fabrication, just like the Michael Jackson evidence trial. Completely fabricated evidence that, when put to a jury test, did not stand up.
And
so, do you think you'll get justice in any part of this? When you're done with all this, do you think you will really get justice? That they will pay out on somebody's bond and you will collect money or get something for your 30 days wrongfully incarcerated? Because that's actually kidnapping. That's false imprisonment and kidnapping by somebody masquerading as a judge with jurisdiction authority. Do you think you will ever get, Mr. Scheid, justice?
The justice is going to come from the court of public opinion. It's not going to come from any court that we have, because I don't believe these courts, they call them court buildings, courtrooms, but we don't have courts running in place. We've got, in Wayne County anyway, I've got the evidence, we've got domestic terrorism and domestic...
So these are county terrorist torture chambers.
That's correct.
Star chamber proceedings.
That's correct.
Okay, you heard it from Mr. Scheid himself, right here at his home, someplace in Novi, Michigan. That's it. See ya.
So if you'll...
William Wagener here in Toledo, Ohio, where there are some gentlemen gathered who know things that maybe you ought to hear about. We're going to start today here in Toledo with Brian T. Michael, and then later we'll hear from a grand jury expert. Brian, what do you got to tell me?
Hello, my name is Brian T. Michael. What I have to give to you today is that in Columbus, Ohio, in the court system, there is disability fraud involving guardianships. There is administrative abuses going on with judges. There are cover-ups with prosecutors on RICO. We found out that the dispatch ran a 5-part series, that the court was complicit, that they had specialized doctors on that were unlicensed. Dr. John Gill Randall was an unlicensed psychiatrist going around rubber stamping people with Alzheimer's dementia in order to trigger guardianships, and the judges were steering contracts to their fellow magistrates. Now we have Supreme Court documentation that says there had been a history of rubber stamping a former magistrate. His name was Brian Johnson, his pleadings. So what we understand is that people were also being human trafficked into nursing homes, and that one of my friends was lucky to get out of the nursing homes. Her name is Geraldine Stanson. They ran an expose on her. her best friend, Kim Albert, died at the age of 55. She was a homeless person, and her guardian, who was also my mom's guardian, was Kevin Crane. Now, the law firm was Kincaid, Randall, and Crane in Upper Arlington, and the unlicensed psychiatrist was Dr. John Gill Randall. He was the unlicensed doctor, like I said, going around understanding people with Alzheimer's dementia. One of my attorneys who filed a 60B, which is a fraud action, was David Belinke. We found out that David Belinke's wife was former chief legal counsel for the Ohio Department of Mental Health. So a lot of the corruption ran into families of the Bexley community and families in Upper Arlington. Now we also know that this corruption was generational. That the sons and daughters of these people were taught, their parents taught their kids how to get these guardianships and these disabilities up and running. Now we know some of the judges were complicit too. Judge Metcalf, former probate judge, his son was a broker. We know that they were steering contracts to Stephen Metcalf in order to launder people's money out of their estates. And so, like I said, we found out that one of the gentlemen who was an esquire by the name of Paul Corminick was charged with 11 count indictments. The prosecutor is Thomas Allen. He will be sentenced October the 20th in the year this year in 2015. They dropped the RICO charge, but we know that he's going to plead guilty to the other 10 indictments. My case is currently being...
What county was that in, if I can interrupt you, Brian?
Sure, this is in Franklin County, Ohio.
Franklin County, Ohio.
Franklin County, Ohio.
And who's being sentenced in October of this year?
His name is Paul Corminick. He had over 400 wards. He had 400 guardians that he was responsible for. And some of the things he was charged with was falsifying documentation, embezzlement of funeral funds from the indigent fund through the county, hiding assets. And the other attorney who's under investigation by the district council was a former magistrate by the name of Kevin Crane. He lives in Upper Arlington.
So both these guys were bar-carded people.
Bar-carded people, and they were just the tip of the iceberg.
And 400, he was getting, let me understand, he was getting paid for 400 people he was guardian for?
That's correct.
And then he was shipping them off to nursing homes?
Some of these people were in nursing homes, and they were being medicated with up to 10 or 11 psychotropic drugs, so they couldn't. Geraldine, one of my best friends, she's alive. She was able to get out of Regency Manor, one of the nursing homes on Allen Creek.
Regency Manor.
Regency Manor was the name of the nursing home.
On what street?
I believe it's on Allen Creek Road or Allen Creek Drive in Columbus.
In Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, she was able to get out of there. A psychologist by the name of Dr. Weaver said she should not be under guardianship, that she could take care of herself and them on her own. But a lot of these people, they have their businesses taken from her. She had a $200,000 home up in Worthington that was taken from her. And they find out that you have assets, or they manufacture these disabilities. And these people end up as wards to the estate, which is very unfortunate because they end up losing everything. And then once they deplete you of your funds, they have a tendency to give the guardianship back to the family, but only after they depleted all your assets.
Isn't that a cute game for the bar-carded people?
It sure is.
And they live in very fancy homes after they get that many guardians under them, don't they?
Yes, they do.
They drive the best cars and wear the best suits.
The best cars, the best suit, and the finest restaurants while you're living in a nursing home indigent.
Because they're eating up your estate.
Eating up your estate, taking your bank accounts. They keep you out of your house, and they go through your antiques. They take their antiques, and one of the attorneys says it's a very incestuous business because they steer under guardianships. There's insurance, bankerage, brokerage, mortgage lending, tax press, nursing homes, and all these people, even the social workers in the nursing homes, network with these esquires that do probate, these disability frauds that go on.
Wow. This sounds like a familiar story I heard up in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. I heard about this in Colorado. I didn't know it was happening in Ohio.
Should I mention Dispatch? The Dispatch series is dispatchunguarded.com. So anybody can go to that archive and pull up these articles on these people who were. The Dispatch told Geraldine Stanson, "You're lucky to be alive." Now, her best friend Kim Albert was, we believed, homeless and human trafficked into the nursing home system because basically they're after your benefits. So what they can, the attorney makes money by being your guardian, and the nursing home makes money by going after your Social Security trust fund money. So if they're able, a lot, like I said, the law firm will use a social worker, and sometimes they're not even licensed. And we said with Dr. John Randall, the unlicensed psychiatrist, there was no full disclosure of him being unlicensed. I mean, my 60B, which was the fraud action, wasn't filed until 2004. So for 25 years, nobody was making disclosure on him being unlicensed.
Now this bar carded person that goes on trial,
Paul Cornick.
yeah, has he been disbarred yet?
I believe there's an action pending through the disciplinary council.
And the guy that's about to, what's his name? He's about
Kevin
to be
Crane.
sentenced in October.
Yeah, Paul Cornick will be sentenced October the 20th.
Has he been disbarred yet from the private bar
I
card
sure
club?
hope so. He
But
should
you don't
never have a
know.
license. I don't know yet. I've blown the whistle to FBI agents. I've blown the whistle to sergeants in the Franklin County Sheriff's Department. He approached the county prosecutor, and he said it was going nowhere on the investigation. So we know the county prosecutor, the judges are complicit. We don't refer to it as government anymore. We refer to it as like a corporate circus. There isn't really no government per se. These are for-profit corporations fleecing the citizens of America.
So would it be accurate to describe it as the bar carded private club running a RICO operation, a criminal operation against we the people? And secondly, would it be accurate to say that we the people no longer have a government of, by, and for the people, regardless of party?
Regardless of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, there is no more government. There are only for-profit corporations. We know that every one of these guardianship actions creates bonds. We know that these so-called pseudo courts are nothing more than extortion banking centers, and that it's all about, I call it dollars for dementia. These thugocracies operate only to fleece the people, not to help the people. And when you go to blow the whistle to the Attorney General's office or to the police force, you're running them up against usually high-ranking Freemasons who also are charged with cover-ups. Now, when I went to my accountant and had the paperwork overlooked, because my mom was under guardian for 6 years, he gave me an information referral form. We sent on to the IRS, and he checked 2 boxes. He checked organized crime and forged and altered documents. And I took that to law enforcement, and the FBI just said, well, this doesn't meet the nexus for RICO. And about maybe 4 to 6 weeks later, then they charged the attorney under the Ohio RICO statutes.
So who prosecuted the guy that is being sentenced this October, that former bar carded attorney?
The Chief Economics Crimes Prosecutor for Franklin County is Jeff Blake. His supervisor would be Ron O'Brien, and the assistant county prosecutor would be Thomas Allen.
And so they actually did get him convicted.
They did get the bar member convicted.
Did he plead out or?
He pled guilty.
He pled guilty. 10
of the 11 counts, they dropped the 11th count of RICO.
So he's going to prison under RICO statutes.
No, he's not under RICO statutes. He's going under prison for theft, for falsification of paperwork. Now, it's a felony to falsificate a probate. It's also a felony, we know, to falsify a probate document. That is a felony in the state of Ohio, when they falsify probate documents. And we know that we also want to get a taxpayer lawsuit against Dr. John Gale Randall because they were using taxpayer funds to fund the unlicensed psychiatrist who made over $200,000 for doing these evaluations from 1976 on up to 2003. And he also ran a private practice over on Zollinger Road in Upper Arlington.
Wow. So he made over $200,000, unlicensed psychologists made over $200,000 per year, or over that whole span?
Over that whole span for doing these evaluations. This is taxpayer-funded fraud.
Did he testify at all as to how much time he actually spent? I mean, doing the evaluations, or any of them?
It was a dispatch article said that it was titled "Courts Rely on an Unlicensed Psychiatrist," and that basically they just forced him. He never had a license, but they told him he could be no longer. The state medical board said you can no longer practice in the state of Ohio or be a licensed physician. So he wasn't even prosecuted And we tried to get him prosecuted. That's when I went to Sergeant Dave Hunt of the Franklin County Sheriff's Department, and that's when he came back to me and said that Ron O'Brien declined to prosecute him because he was told by the judge, another corrupt judge, Lawrence Belskis, that he did good things for the court. So there was a good old boy system that we were running up against.
The judge had told the police officer this unlicensed psychiatrist did good things for the community?
Yes, he did. That was the judge telling the Franklin County prosecutor that.
And that was Judge who?
Judge Lawrence Belskis.
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 And is he still on the bench?
Actually, he was with Wilesboro, Burkholm, and Bringarner, and he was steering these guardianships to his friends at that law firm. One of his friends was a former judge by the name of Michael Close, and one of the individuals was a state senator who got barred from doing probate. He was State Senator Jim Hughes. He's the one that there was also a Korean War vet. They cleaned him out. His name was Miles Keith. And I actually have the lawsuit, not with me, but there was a lawsuit filed, a 9-count lawsuit, and one of them was civil conspiracy, abuse of process. It just ran the gamut. They held him in a nursing home in Bexley, and State Senator Jim Hughes was barred from doing probate because he was one of the persons that stole from him too.
So he can do other kind of lawsuits, but he can't do...
He can no longer do probate. He was barred from doing probate, but that lawsuit was successful. That lawsuit was filed by a former attorney of mine, Dennis Fennessy, and Tim Ryan of Gallagher, Vance, Bryan, Talon, and Luttrell. But even even after you ask the attorney to prosecute, the bar can lean on your attorney and threaten them, and you can then withdraw from counsel on you if they get pressure from the bar association, leaving you without an avenue of approach for relief.
And do you know that that's happened at least once in matters you're familiar with?
Yeah, because I've got the articles that the dementia ruined his life and lawyers ruined his life. This was a retired Korean War vet who also worked for the city of Columbus. Was worth over $1 million, and he had rental properties. And by the time the litigation was all over, they kept him in the nursing home for 18 months. He was they stole over probably about $750,000 from him.
Is he suing to get anything back?
He's deceased, but his sister is a child psychologist by the name of Etta Brown out in Oakland, California. I'm very good friends with her, and they won their lawsuit. But I think the lawsuit was they gagged order the amount of the lawsuit. It was he got about 10% of actually he was worth about $75,000 in the lawsuit, and she was told by her attorney it would be a good idea for you to go back to Oakland and not stay in Franklin County too long. Tim Ryan told her that.
And Etta Brown would be about how old?
Etta Brown is probably about 73 years old. That's Miles Keith's sister.
Interesting. Very interesting.
But this is probably going on all over the country. The probate courts are totally, not courts, the probate corporations, because these are not courts of law. They are they are prize courts. And your prize is the value of your estate, the money and property. And the longer they can keep you in probate, we call it slow walk. They slow walk you through the process in order to bleed you out and steal the value of your estate.
In your mother's case, has she recovered any of the estate value that they stole from her while they had her as a ward of the state?
We haven't recovered one penny yet. The attorney, which would be Michael O'Reilly, we wanted to go after three things. We wanted to go after. The first thing we wanted to go after would be the client security fund. Then we wanted a malpractice lawsuit against both attorneys. Now the attorney, one of the attorneys, Jay Leshner, took money to oppose the guardianship and filed a brief that this guardianship should not go forward. Then he flip-flopped on us at the last minute, did what's called accommodation settlement, applied for the guardianship. So he took money to oppose it and then applied for it all within a 3-month time span. He flip-flopped on us.
So would you tell people generally never hire an attorney?
I would say do not hire an attorney because you're going to go through a process where you cannot win. The cards are stacked against you, and all they want is the value of, they want to run the bill up as fast as they can, and they want to embezzle as much money as they can. And they call it it's not a lawful system, but they call it a legal system. There's nothing legal with what they do. It's all smoke and mirrors.
There's nothing lawful about it either.
It's plunder and deceit, pure plunder and deceit.
Plunder and deceit by the private club, otherwise known as the Bar Association.
Exactly, which is a subsidiary of the British BAR stands for British Accredited Registry, the American Bar Association, subsidiary of that corporation. So all Esquires are titles of nobility, and the founding fathers said if you have a title of nobility, you cannot hold office in the United States of America.
Have you ever heard of the original 13th Amendment?
Yeah, I've heard of it through my common law class, the Tona Act.
Did you know a man named Gus actually has state archives from New England with the original state archives that list the original 13th Amendment prior to 1830?
I did not know that.
It's in, and he has the book, the actual state archive, because for some reason the state sold it. Decided it was too old, antique, unneeded, and superseded. And he picked it up, I think, for $200 or $300, which is amazing.
That is amazing. I forgot to mention that you also have to bond out these guardians. So the insurance, you have to underwrite them. So we know that the insurance company was Palmer, Miller, Nelson, and before Kevin Crane got involved, Kincaid, Randall, Crane was Palmer, Kincaid, and Randall. So the insurance companies make out like bandits, and we know that Grange was a big insurance company in Central Ohio. They were underwriting a lot of these guardians.
Interesting. Well, thank you for your testimony today. Is what you're telling me true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, it is. It's also factual, and you can be documented in my probate court case, and my state case. All the information is in there, and it's online. It's available to anybody. It's public record.
And they can find that where on the web?
They can find it. They can go to the Franklin County Probate Court, and they can research it through case number 484002, which is the guardianship case, or they can research it through the state case, which was 528-087, which is still pending.
528 what?
087.
08.
It's the estate case of Clara M. Michael.
All right, very good. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you, Owen, for having me today.
Good afternoon, Charlie.